You think your thoughts are yours, that you shape them, control them, choose them. But what if they've been choosing you? What if the beliefs you hold, the decisions you make, the fears you feel, aren't rooted in truth, but in unseen patterns inside your mind? Every day, without realizing it, you fall into traps. Not physical ones, psychological ones. Invisible shortcuts your brain uses to reduce uncertainty, to avoid discomfort, to preserve your identity, even if it means distorting reality. You justify what hurts, ignore what contradicts, believe what feels safe, not what's true. And these traps don't just influence you, they define you. They create the version of yourself you think is real, but beneath them is someone else, someone quieter, someone who sees. This video is not about psychology, it's about self-revelation. We'll uncover the most powerful and dangerous mind traps you walk through every day, not to scare you, not to fix you, but to give you something you've been searching for without knowing, a mirror, one that doesn't reflect who you've become, but who you are beneath the programming. Are you ready? Let's begin. Before we dive into what your mind hides from you, take a breath. If you've ever questioned your thoughts, if you've ever felt trapped in invisible cycles, if something deep in you has always whispered, "This isn't all there is," then this space was made for you. Comment below and share which mental pattern you've seen in yourself, because chances are someone else watching feels exactly the same, but doesn't yet have words for it. And your truth might be the mirror they didn't know they needed. This isn't just a video, it's a shared remembering, and it begins now. You want to believe you made the right choice, that you're okay, that what hurt you didn't, that you've moved on, but something feels split. That's where cognitive dissonance lives, in the quiet war between what you believe and what you feel but can't face. It's when the heart says one thing and the mind rewrites it just to keep you standing. You stay in a relationship that feels hollow and convince yourself it's love. You walk away from a dream and whisper, "It wasn't meant to be." It's not weakness, it's self-preservation. The mind can't bear contradiction, so it edits reality until it fits your emotional survival. There's a story your nervous system carries, a need to avoid pain at all costs. So when reality hurts, the mind rewrites the memory. You didn't fail, they were unfair. You weren't rejected, you never wanted it anyway. And sometimes you believe it fully until something cracks. A smell, a voice, a silence that opens a door you tried to seal. And then the truth returns, quiet but undeniable. That's when it hurts, because you realize you've been protecting yourself with a version of the story that isn't whole. But maybe you needed it that way. Maybe survival meant telling yourself what you could handle until you were ready to feel what's true. Cognitive dissonance is not your enemy. It's the signal that two truths are colliding. The you that wants to grow and the you that still bleeds in silence. And when they finally meet, not with force, but with softness, that's where integration begins. That's where healing doesn't scream, it just becomes visible. You believe something, and without realizing, you search for proof, not for truth, but for confirmation. You scroll and click what agrees. You listen and remember what reinforces. You ignore what disrupts and embrace what feels familiar. This is confirmation bias, the mind's reflex to protect its beliefs by filtering reality. You don't see the world as it is, you see it as you've trained yourself to. It happens quietly. You think you're being logical, but you're just repeating the version of the world you've already decided is real. Your brain doesn't want truth, it wants comfort. and comfort comes from patterns. So when a belief is threatened, the mind defends it, even if it hurts you, because losing the belief feels like losing yourself. You see it in relationships. You believe they love you, so you overlook the withdrawal, the silence, the cracks. You believe you're not enough, so every critique feels like proof, every failure a confirmation. And the more you look, the more evidence appears. Not because it's true, but because the mind finds what it expects to find. The trap is deep, because confirmation bias doesn't feel like bias. It feels like clarity. You say, I knew it, I felt it, I was right. But were you? Or were you just listening to the echo of a belief you were too afraid to lose? To see beyond it, you must be willing to stand in uncertainty, to ask, what if I'm wrong? What if the truth is more complex? What am I avoiding by holding on to this belief? That takes courage, because letting go of a belief can feel like losing identity. But identity built on illusion is not stability, it's a cage. And only when you question the bars can you begin to leave it. Confirmation bias isn't just mental, it's emotional, it's ancestral. It protects old wounds. You believe you're hard to love because being loved without question was never modeled for you. You believe nothing works out because life taught you to expect disappointment before it arrives. These aren't facts, they're survival beliefs, formed in moments you didn't get to choose, but now you can. You can pause before assuming, breathe before reacting, ask before confirming. You can let space exist between belief and conclusion. That space is awareness. That space is where transformation starts. You walk into the room, your hands are sweating. You feel every eye on you, though no one has said a word. You adjust your posture, fix your expression, overthink every movement. You're sure they noticed the stain on your shirt, the crack in your voice, the silence after you spoke, but they didn't, because they weren't watching. This is the spotlight. Affect the illusion that you are being observed, judged, measured constantly, when in truth, you're not. What you feel as scrutiny is often your own projection. The echo of old judgment now turned inward. The mind becomes a stage. You become the actor, the critic, the crowd, but the crowd is inside you, not around you. You remember that moment you tripped, misspoke, froze. You carried the memory for years, believing everyone else remembered too, but they didn't, because they were too busy, living inside their own spotlights, worried about how they sounded, how they looked, how they would be seen. We're all haunted by the mirror we believe others hold up to us. But often, that mirror is our own shame, not their gaze. You learned this somewhere, maybe early, maybe quietly, that to be seen was to be in danger, to be wrong was to be punished, to stand out was to risk rejection. So now, even in silence, you brace for exposure. But the eyes you fear are often your own, trained over time to seek imperfection and call it identity. The mind exaggerates the moment. A small mistake becomes a defining flaw. A glance becomes disapproval. Silence becomes humiliation. And none of it is real. It feels real because the body remembers. But memory isn't always truth. Sometimes it's trauma with good storytelling. So how do you soften it? By stepping out of the imagined light. By realizing that being seen isn't always a threat. Sometimes it's presence, witnessing, connection. And sometimes no one is watching at all. You are allowed to breathe without performing, to exist without editing, to walk into a room without narrating your every flaw. Here's the shift. What if you weren't the story you thought everyone was reading? What if no one saw the crack because they were too busy hiding their own? What if you could release the fear of being seen and discover the freedom of being real? The spotlight isn't out there, it's inside you, and maybe now you're ready to dim it. They look right, they speak well, they seem calm, and before they even reveal who they are, you already trust them. Something about them feels safe, familiar, true. But what you're seeing may not be them, it may be you. This is the halo effect, when one positive trait casts a glow over everything else. A glow so bright, you stop questioning. It starts with one detail, their tone, their smile, their background, and suddenly your mind fills in the blanks. You assume they're intelligent, kind, stable, but you're not seeing the person, you're seeing the projection. A mental shortcut created from old emotional blueprints. Maybe someone calm once protected you. Maybe someone beautiful once loved you. Now your mind looks for them in everyone new. But halos distort. They soften what should be seen clearly. They protect what should be questioned. They invite trust before truth. You find yourself explaining away red flags. You feel drawn to someone but can't explain why. You excuse behavior because the glow blinds the details. You don't want to believe that what shines can still hurt, but it can, and often it does. You've seen this before. The person with the title, the charm, the perfect presentation, and behind the scenes manipulation, detachment, even cruelty. But no one suspects, because the halo is strong, and people want to believe in light even when it hides a shadow. It happens in relationships. You meet someone who fits your idea of good, and suddenly they become more than they are. You ignore the distance, the contradictions, the silence, because to question them would mean questioning the part of you that trusted too soon. And that's harder to face. But here's the truth. No one is their halo. No one is just their highlight. And no one deserves blind faith. Real connection isn't built on glow. It's built on honesty, time, contradiction, depth. It's in the tension between beauty and flaw, light and doubt. So next time someone walks in and something in you lights up, pause, ask, what am I really seeing? What am I projecting? What do I want them to be? Because the moment you can separate who they are from who you need them to be, you begin to see clearly, not through glow, but through grounded vision. And maybe you've worn halos too. Maybe people trusted you too quickly, expected too much, projected too deeply, and maybe you felt trapped by that light. Because halos don't just blind others, they blind us to ourselves. You don't need to shine to be worthy. You can be real, visible, contradictory, whole. You hear a number, see a price, feel a first impression, and suddenly, everything after that shifts around it. Not because it's right, but because it came first. This is the anchoring effect. The mind's reflex to attach itself to the first reference it finds, and measure all that follows in its shadow. It doesn't need to be true, it just needs to arrive early. A high number makes the next seem small. A polished stranger makes the quiet one seem unsure. A compliment at the start makes all criticism feel softer. We are not comparing reality, we are comparing sequence. And the first always wins. But here's where it gets deeper. Anchors aren't just numbers. They're memories, they're emotions, they're wounds. Your first experience of love becomes your standard, even if it hurt you. Your first definition of success becomes the one you chase, even if it's not yours. The mind clings to beginnings because they feel like truth. But sometimes, They're just trauma in disguise. You stay in a job because it pays more than your last, not because it feeds you. You hold on to someone because they're kinder than your ex, not because they see you. You say yes because the no feels like failure compared to what came first. But comparison is not clarity, and sometimes your first frame is the most distorted. You didn't choose these anchors. They were given by culture, by family, by pain, and they shaped your perception without asking for permission. Now you measure everything through them. You ask, is this better? Instead of, is this right for me? And that shift makes all the difference. Anchors aren't evil, they're human. They help us make sense of a world too complex to grasp all at once. But if they go unexamined, they become cages. You stop questioning, you start justifying. You live inside a frame that was never meant for your truth. So how do you break it? You pause. You notice the first voice and question its tone. You step back from the scale and ask, who set this measure? Is this mine? And you allow yourself to see things not as better or worse, but as real. You step out of the shadow of what came before and into the light of what is. Because freedom doesn't come from erasing your past. It comes from no longer letting it decide your worth. You get to choose again. You get to reset the anchor. You get to define what matters, not based on what you've seen, but on what you now know. You've seen the traps, felt their shape, heard the echo of your own thoughts inside them, and maybe now you feel a little less alone. Because the mind doesn't just think, it protects, it rewrites, it hides. But once you see the patterns, they can no longer hold you the same way. So tell me, which of these traps lives closest to your silence? Which one still whispers when you're trying to sleep? Comment below, let it out, because your story might be the permission someone else is waiting for. And if this video touched something real in you, subscribe, not for the algorithm, but for the version of you who is finally ready to see clearly. This is Psychological Shadow, and here we remember what the world taught us to forget.